Welcome to Melody Makers, where we discuss arranging and composing and meet the real melody makers behind the music of Melody's traditional music, folkharp.com, and Afghan press music for the harp. I'm Gretchen Monson, harpist, pianist, organist, and arranger, and your host for today. In today's episode, we have a special guest with us. Frank Voltz is a pioneer in the world of gospel jazz harp, a prolific composer and arranger, and a talented pianist and organist as well. Before we chat with Frank, let's get a taste of his work. This is Once Upon a Time, performed by the composer himself. So you came to harp kind of later. You were already a successful organist and pianist. So what drew you to the harp?
I took a semester of harp in college, just as an elective, and I had a wonderful teacher, and I just fell in love with the instrument. But of course, they're very expensive, and I couldn't afford one. As a matter of fact, I couldn't even afford a piano. I bought my first grand piano when I was 25 years old. And that was a big undertaking for me, and I loved it. And at the age of 37, I decided I wasn't getting any younger, and if this was something that I really loved and really wanted to do, I sold my grand piano to buy my first harp. And I bought the largest harp I could find, which was a Venus Classic. Well, the Venus Classic has all those carved roses on it. And shortly after I started playing, because I was a pianist and because I read music, I could look at a piece of harp music and I could hear it in my head, but I didn't have the technique or the skills to make it happen. But I kind of picked up wedding repertoire quickly and started playing weddings. Well, the problem was I'd show up with this Venus Classic and everybody thought I was the husband carrying the harp. It was the girliest harp ever made. And well, that's probably not true. There's some pretty girly harps out there. I couldn't wait to part with that harp. And now I have a Model 30. And, the Model 30 is very sleek and very modern and very, it's very masculine. So I'm a happy guy. Actually, the Model 30 was the harp I used for all of my recordings. When the Model 30 got a little age on it, I put it in retirement. I just kind of left it sitting in the harp room, and I ordered a Camac Big Blue, which is electroacoustic and is an absolutely magnificent harp. And at the time that I ordered it, I was the assistant director of music at the largest evangelical church in the Washington metropolitan area, and we had a 2,700 seat auditorium. But when I brought the harp, all they had to do was plug it in. There was no distortion. I didn't have to play. I didn't have to grab the strings or play hard at all. I just, did my thing, and they loved it. The sound man was like, "Are you going to bring the blue?" And I'm like, "Okay." But I started playing harp when I was 37, and in 5 years, in 1997, I had met Ray Poole. I met Ray at a harp conference in Baltimore. He was just kind of walking around giving everybody the stink eye. And he looked at me and he said, "You need to come to New York. I can get you to win the Lyon and Healy International Jazz and Pop competition." And I didn't know what he was talking about. But if someone offers, to give you lessons, you don't want to say no. Especially Ray was, a force to be reckoned with at the time. He played at the Waldorf Astoria, the Peacock Room, every night. And I had decided at the age of 37, I was not young. I was not your typical harpist. And I looked around the country to see what kind of harpists I fit in. And there were only about 4 or 5 gospel jazz harpists in the country. Greg Buchanan is one name. Linda Rice is another name. There were just a few. And I had been playing organ in church since I was 11 years old. So I knew all the hymns, and I knew I had played all of the hymns. And I thought, the harp is such a beautiful instrument, and hymns would be so beautiful on the harp. And so I started out as a gospel jazz harpist because it was the smallest niche of harpists, and I knew I would fit in. And so that's kind of how I got my start. I began arranging hymns because I went to several Greg Buchanan concerts, and I don't know if you've ever heard Greg play, but he has this lightning fast right hand, and he just does all these pyrotechnics with the harp, and praises God at the same time, and it's like the perfect combination. But the one thing about Greg was, if you wanted to hear Greg's arrangements, you went to Greg's concert. And if you wanted to hear Linda Rice play, you went and heard Linda Rice play. No one published their harp arrangements. Now, you got to also remember this was 30 years ago. No one recorded their harp arrangements. And I decided, if I'm good at what I do, I'm going to make my arrangements available for other harpists so that everyone can play Frank Voltz. Everyone can play harp arrangements in their church. And at the time, this was pre-contemporary services. So it was very common for harpists to play in traditional worship services. And my music kind of bubbled up to the top because it was like the only music there was. So that was fun. and I arranged a lot of harp music. I wanted to record a CD, and most of the people that I spoke to on the subject of a CD said, the first thing you want to do is record a Christmas CD because it'll sell the best, and the profits you make from the first CD will pay for your second CD. And it kind of works that way. Well, I didn't like that idea. It's a great idea, and I would say the majority of people who are independent artists do that, or did back then. I decided I wanted to record a gospel jazz CD. And so my very first CD was The Soul of the Harp, which is a gospel jazz CD. I enjoyed that project so much. And my recording engineer happened to be a close friend, but happened to be an absolute genius at engineering. And I just wasn't done. It's like I had the whole project, I wasn't done. And so my second CD was The Soul of the Harp, which was also a gospel jazz CD. My third CD was the Christmas Harp CD, and of course it did well. My other two recordings did well because I did concerts and people liked to take me home. So that worked out really well. I have reprinted both the first and the second CD. There's still a lot of them left in my basement, because CDs don't sell well anymore. But I had a really good career. I was at the right place at the right time. I would probably say that is my biggest claim to fame is I was at the right place at the right time. A lot of women who were empty nesters bought their first harp and decided they wanted to play the harp, and they found Frank Voltz music very accessible. And it also gave people an opportunity to play in church. A lot of people who have never played harp in public are very nervous about playing in public because, we're adults, so we care about the mistakes. If you're a child, you don't really care about the mistakes because they're going to happen. But as an adult, every little mistake, is a tragedy. But people discovered that playing in church was a very safe environment. And people loved you no matter what you did and no matter what you played. People loved what you did. It was a very accepting environment, and people were happy to play in church. People were happy to have people play in church. Let me go back to 1997, Ray Poole said he was going to get me to compete in the Lennon Healy International Jazz and Pop Competition, which I did in 1997, and I took second prize. Now, I was 43 years old. So I was not, like this wonder kid, doing this, amazing stuff. I was an adult with decent chops, and Ray helped me get to that place. I credit Ray with a lot of my beginning success. And then after I was, known as, one of the winners of that competition, which no longer exists, of course, I got on the circuit of performing and being a clinician at harp conferences. And I've been a clinician at harp conferences all over the country over the years. But the reason I mention that is because I would play my concerts and people would come up to me after the concert and say, "Do you compose music?" And I'm like, "No, I'm an arranger. I really like arranging. Arranging is my comfort zone. It's what I do well. I'm happy where I am." And people would say, "But your music is so beautiful. We want you to compose something so that we can play it." And I'm like, yeah. So I kind of put that on the back burner for a couple years. Then I wrote a couple things that were kind of magnum opus kind of things. And they are published, but they don't sell well because they're difficult pieces of music. So I wrote a piece that was late beginner, early intermediate. And the name of that piece is Above the Clouds. It's probably a piece that you've heard of because just about everybody knows it and everybody plays it. It's simple, but it's lovely. It's a very pretty piece of music. So I recorded my third CD, which was the Christmas CD, and Silent Night. Silent Night is 3 chords. I decided to put jazz chords to Silent Night. And my Silent Night was like no other Silent Night anyone's ever heard. And Silent Night was a huge seller. And then I wrote Above the Clouds. Well, guess what? Above the Clouds outsold Silent Night. I think there's something going on here. So I started composing music. And here we are many, 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 many years later. The name of my music publishing company is Chiera Music, Chiera, Chiera Music. And Chiera is my mother's maiden name. I named my music publishing company after my mother because she gave me piano lessons and braces. She said, if you're going to be on stage, you got to have nice teeth. So I credit my mother with a lot of my success. And I wanted to honor her by naming the music company after her. So at this point, I have over 100 titles in the catalog. The number 100 was like the magic number, and I'm like, okay, 100, that's kind of a lot of pieces to, manage and take care of and keep in print and blah, 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 blah. And then PDFs came out and everybody released their music in PDFs except Frank. So finally, being the dinosaur that I am, I finally released my my catalog in PDFs. Well, then all of a sudden I had like a new following, a new sales opportunity, and it wasn't, but it was only new to me. It wasn't new to the harp world. It was just new to me. So I was stubborn not to release them because a lot of people wanted me to, but I just said no. And then when the day came that I said yes, I was flooded. There was a deluge of sales. And so my music will live on for perpetuity because, it's available and it will always be available.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your experience in the jazz harp world. So you said you got into some jazz stuff with Ray Poole. And then after the competition, how did you continue that? I know there's a lot of improvisation involved. And then did you play with any bands?
In those days, I lived in Washington, D.C. Actually, I lived in Fairfax in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. Bands would contact, like the principal harpist of the National Symphony, and they'd contact, the well-known harpists in Washington, D.C. Well, I was the only jazz harpist in town. And so they'd say, oh, you want Frank? Call Frank Voltz, he'll do it, and I have a stack of CDs that I played harp on, and these are like, heavy metal, really weird CDs with harp on them. It was funny, a lot of times they would hand me charts and I'd look at them and I'd say, thanks very much, but these aren't playable. Can I just do my thing? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. That sounds good. So I would have, the recording, in my headphones, and I would just improvise and play and stuff. And afterwards, the leader of the group or whatever, wow, that's really fabulous. I never thought we could have anything that cool on the project. So I just had a lot of opportunity. The other thing about my jazz is I applied jazz to traditional hymns that were 200 years old. So I took What a Friend in Jesus and turned it into blues. and I took Wonderful Words of Life. I decided if Harpo Marx played Wonderful Words of Life, what would it sound like? Well, it would have all these glisses in it, and it would probably be a waltz. So I published Wonderful Words of Life in the style of Harpo Marx. I thought it was a lot of fun to play. And a lot of the gospel jazz hymn arrangements are difficult. Well, that left a large number of harpists who were beginner intermediates and intermediate beginners. It kind of left them like with nothing to play in the Frank Voltz realm. And so I killed two birds with one stone. One of the things that people criticized me about at harp conferences was all of my music were solos. You would buy a solo piece of music, and they were like, why don't you have books? You know, it would be so nice if you had books because that would be cheaper and then I wouldn't have to pay so much for your music. Well, my music was not that expensive. I mean, $5 for a solo was not a lot of money back then. It's not a lot of money now, and I have not raised my prices. But I started the Harpist Hymnal. This is volume 1, and volume 1 has easy but interesting, not your typical hymn arrangements. So there are these 5 volumes of the Harpist Hymnal. I think 5 is enough. There are 5 pieces in every book. So that's 20 pieces that people can play in church. And I think that should keep them busy the rest of their church careers. So there.
Fantastic. Well, that is so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your harp music journey with us today. It has been both exciting and insightful.
Well, I appreciate your inviting me to do this.
Well, it's been great. And all of your pieces are available on Melodies for the people listening to go and buy them and play them and enjoy them. They are very accessible arrangements and compositions.
Let me say 2 things. One, Melody Music is the only vendor that carries hard copy and PDFs. All my other vendors only carry PDFs. So if you wanted a hard copy, go to Melodies. They've got everything. The other thing I want to say is 30 years ago, Mary Radspinner was a pioneer in harp music accessible to harpists, not, symphony, I've got my master's in harp. I mean, people who just play the harp because they love the harp. Mary Radspinner was there for them and made things available. And I will always be grateful for the opportunities that Mary gave me because there wasn't anyone else in the business doing what she was doing. And I'm just so grateful for Mary.
Yes, indeed. We all are. All right. And to close, we have another recording by Frank and a friend, Carla Bos. Here is William Tell Overture for Harp Duet. Thank you for listening today. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Share the Melody Makers podcast with your family, friends, and favorite keyboardist, because let's be honest, they all want to be harpists. On behalf of Melody's traditional music and Afghan press music for the harp, this is Gretchen Monson wishing you a joyful, music-filled day.